Hello and welcome. My name is Preacher, and today, not too much on it, dog. But we do have some rumors. Some rumors straight from the lips of the mouthpiece himself, Jazz Corden, Windows Central writer, Jazz Corden. Now, if we don't know who Jess Corden is, which I can't blame you for, he is a writer for Windows Central, the lead writer on. He's really to give him his flowers, he is in some ways he's the foremost journalist on Xbox, like the podcast Xbox community, right? He really is a writer for Windows Central. That is a legit website with some backing and stuff, so his stuff does get taken for and he does have decent information, right? None of that to knock him. Jez has decent information. He works for a legitimate site, and even though it's obviously Windows coded, Windows Central, so obviously there's a bias there, but he is a journalist, a blogger at least, you know what I mean, a blogger with some official backing, and the information he does get is usually good. The problem I have with Jez Corden is I believe Jez Corden will lie, and I believe that he will mispresent or misconstrue information that he does have in order to, or misrepresent is the word that I'm looking for. He'll misrepresent information that he does have in order to make it seem better for Xbox, especially if they're already down. He's the type of guy to be like, no, nuh-uh, Xbox, nuh-uh. Like literally, nuh-uh. Yeah. So, I mean, he's one of those guys, but there is also a genuineness to Jez, right? And which is strange when I say when I just accused him of lying and misrepresenting information, but the genuineness comes from his genuine fandom for Xbox and the things that he likes, right? He genuinely loves Xbox for whatever reason, you know what I mean? And it's very clear, that he wants them to do well and wants them to be perceived well. And that's what motivates his misrepresentation in those lies, right? But he said something that I don't think he would have said, because I can't see how that would be better, for how the rumor presented would be better for Xbox. And I should let him explain it. So we're going to splice in a clip here. This is what Jez Corden had to say about PlayStation potentially pulling back on PC support.
I actually heard the complete opposite today from a very good source.
About
That PlayStation probably is pulling back from PC, and
really?
also that the cross play buttons and the PlayStation PC iconography is from like outdated old builds and is never going to be used. But
Interesting.
I don't know.
So all that is interesting, right? We do have a follow-up tweet here that reassures the base, because this goes directly into the face of what a lot of Xbox pundits have been saying for years now, 5 years now. Day and date is coming, day and date is coming, day and date is coming. 5 years of that. Literally 5 years of that. And it's not here, and Jez Corden says they're pulling back on it. I mean, it's fucking embarrassing, but that's why he has to say things like that. That's why I believe this clarifying tweet when I would, oh no, that's just what I heard, you know what I mean? So, because you see the other pundits doubling further down, and to be fair, we did see the cross-buy iconography, right? And to be even fairer, I don't think PlayStation is actually pulling back on PC support. I would be very surprised it makes more sense for them, unless they're going extreme hardline. That's the thing. It makes more sense for them with the way that gaming is moving now, right? For them to put out their own launcher, have their own space on PC to sell games and DLC and whatever else they want to sell, and have a market to make money and potentially make hardware in, which they're already doing. You know what I mean? There's an avenue for money to be made there. But what that won't make you is more Nintendo. If you wanted to become the like Nintendo-esque epitome of clothes, like this was all an experiment and hey, didn't work out, we're actually gonna close borders, you could do that. I think PlayStation has the IP. I think PlayStation has the quality. I think PlayStation has the let's not discount the saturation that they actually have, the market penetration they have, that they've earned, built up from years, but it counts for a lot. You know what I mean? They have the market penetration to lock that down and say, hey, no more. Where if you want this stuff, you come here. You know, I will say in Xbox's you know, with credit to them, they have swayed the industry a lot in this new wave of multi-platformism. You know what I mean? They've really opened things up, if for no other reason that their output goes everywhere and they have a lot of output. You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of games going anywhere. There's more games going anywhere than not. You know what I mean? There's still tons of exclusives, and I still believe exclusives are extremely important to a platform. They're detrimental to a platform. You have to have them, but we also can't ignore the reality that more games are everywhere more than ever because architectures are more similar than ever. And you know, I think in general it's a good thing, but I also think it's very important to have certain games that are exclusive to each platform. You know, we've seen how platforms use that to dominate entire generations, and we've seen how without them, platforms crash and burn. We've just seen it, you know. So ultimately, that really is the news and rumor. Jess Corden says offhandedly that PlayStation will be or is considering pulling back on PC support. I can see them pulling back on PC support. Again, with their launcher, I think they could leave all the old stuff on Steam. I think just to dodge the PR, you leave all the old stuff that's on Steam, and then just launch everything new into your launcher, but not anywhere else. I mean, that seems like a simple win. Ultimately, not a bad thing. Depending, I'm split on the launcher because on one hand, it's nice to have that cross-play functionality for the people that have it, but I think people really overestimate how many people that is and how much that affects the market. I think a lot of people have one device for playing games. You know what I mean? And it's nice to have that dual entitlement, but I don't think that it's entirely necessary for most gamers, and I don't think it'll necessarily push a purchasing decision. You know, I think that's still mostly on games, still mostly on the content that the box provides access to exclusively. I think that's a big part of it, and of course just your regular market in saturation and market penetration. Pause. On the other hand, though, day and date with PC in any measure, in a lot of ways, invalidates a need for a console. You know what I mean? You might be making the money on the software, but you have lost that entrance, that allure to your ecosystem, to your platform, to your hardware. Are you going to compete in the hardware space like that? You know, now PlayStation is Sony proper is a hardware company. I think they're built to do that. I think they could do that, but that's not necessarily where I want to see PlayStation go. And I do think day and date would hurt PlayStation as a platform. And I think they'd be uniquely aware of that. So, talking about it more, maybe they are pulling back on PC. You know what I mean? Maybe they do put out their launcher and it comes to their launcher 6 months later. And then it comes to Steam like a year and a half later. Something like that. You know what I mean? Because you still want to push that box. PlayStation still, they're going to very much want to push the PlayStation 6. And like I keep saying, one of the most effective ways to do that is with exclusive content. You have a lot of course, Xbox dudes say no, PlayStation's gonna go day and date. They're gonna bring more stuff to Xbox because it makes more money, right? It's a very simple equation. It's a very simple fallacy, and people believe it because there's a nugget of truth in it, right? If you put your game in more places, there is high potential that it's going to sell more because of that, right? Because there's more opportunity, right? But there's a difference between opportunity and what actually happens, right? Anytime you put a game on PC, it has the opportunity to sell like 200 million copies at least, right? That doesn't happen. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen. So it's and the reason that this is a fallacy pertaining to PlayStation specifically is because there's a lot more to factor in than just the game sale, right? Again, PlayStation is a hardware company. They're trying to sell you PlayStations, right? The console itself. So it's not all about getting an extra maybe million, because even though the opportunity might be 20, 300,000 million extra users, the actual buy-in you're gonna see is not gonna be that. You know what I mean? And we've seen that reflected in PlayStation's financials. I think they took off money from other sections because it just was insignificant. Money from other platforms because it just wasn't a significant amount. You know what I mean? Even Helldivers 2 went over to Xbox, and I think it hit number 6. And of course, they were celebrating, but I'm sure Sony was looking for number 1. You know what I mean? That's a huge game for them. That blew up on every platform for them, but not really on Xbox. You know what I mean? So you got to think it's not all about the potential sales. PlayStation has more vested interest in keeping their walled garden walled than an extra. I mean, not even 2 million sales on Helldivers. You got to think maybe crossed 1 million on Xbox, maybe. You know what I mean? And their recent PC releases haven't lit the world on fire either. I think the last one that did really good was Ghost of Tsushima, which was about maybe 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So if they're looking at that, and that's just what the rumor is, if they're looking at that and saying, hey, these multi-platform sales are not all that it's cracked up to be, we're gonna lock down here and really try to juice our own, make our own juice worth its squeeze. I think that's a good strategy, because I believe in exclusives. I believe in the traditional way of console gaming as it has been. But I also think they could see success in having their own launcher and expanding that ecosystem. But I do think they run the risk of threatening their own hardware with that move. Either way, I'm happy. You guys know me here. I have my ROG Ally. So the more my PlayStation and my ROG Ally kiss, I'm good for it. I'm down for that. But I do think that it's important that as a platform holder, PlayStation has a reason to make games and make deals and pump money into the ecosystem of games that differentiate their platform. Not only am I a fan of the products of those deals and those games for the most part. But I think it is genuinely good for the industry of games and the culture of games, from both simply financial pumping money into these deals standpoint and the competitive nature of the exclusives on each platform that all push to be the best. You know, Sony just got nominated for 19 of the Game Awards. They're the most nominated publisher, you know, at the Game Awards. That happens because they were pushed to make exclusives, make great exclusives, and now that's their cornerstone, and it's reflected throughout the industry. So, you know, complex a bit, you know, a bit rambly today, but this is really interesting times. Like I said before, very interesting times that we're in. And as always, the pews are here to bear witness to it all. But that's gonna be it for me. My name is Preacher, and I do so hope to see you back here on the pews.